Cortical Labs has announced that the tiny human brains that they grew in a lab and sell use for commercially have learned to play Doom. And you know what? I think that might be an original sentence. If you're familiar with my account, you're probably familiar with brain organoids. Yes, you can take stem cells from a human, and then you can coax them into becoming a tiny version of a human brain. They're smaller and don't have all the structures you might expect. However, you can put them together like Legos, or you can have them work as a team. More brain per brain, as you will. Now, they can do all sorts of different things, but Cortical Labs is one of two companies that is selling use of them commercially. So they have a server bank that's run with chips with 16 human brains on them. They also sell brain computers if you really want or need one. Chances are, if you're purchasing something like this, and it is about $30,000, you're probably working in a lab or just have too much money. Now back to video games. Yes, I've seen them put in all sorts of different video games like Pac-Man, and Pong was the first. That was the research paper that Cortical Labs put out. They claimed sentience because they're capable of learning and growing and improving, but more importantly, they have the capacity for preference. They can be trained on dopamine and ordered signals. They consider disorder to be painful or discomfort. Now, you might remember, incorrectly so, that somebody did claim to teach them how to play Doom, but those were rat stem cells, and I would say that it's nowhere near as refined. Yes, you can drop them in a three-dimensional space, at least they think it's three-dimensional. They can experience what happens in the game as a form of sensation. Now remember, these are not entire brains, and although you could have sensory pathways included, sensory for these guys pretty much means that if they touch upon a wall, for example, they'll feel an ordered signal. If they get hit by an enemy in a game, that would be disordered and that would be discomfort. Now, we are rapidly approaching the point at which these little guys could have a true sensory experience, and you'd be correct to say they're pretty basic right now. They're just little brain globs now, but you also have to realize that the first brain organoids were just made a few years ago. We have made rapid progress, and now we're at the point in which we're putting them in simulations. Now, this is a fairly weird part of the field because half of people want to say, look how extraordinary these are. Look at the direction they're going to go. Maybe we ought to consider the ethics before we move forward. And the other side says they are nothing. They're just little pieces of tissue. We cannot humanize them. It turns out both sides are simultaneously correct, and I really do think we'll get to the point where we need to have a very serious conversation about ethics. We already have to have that conversation when it comes to animals, because human brain organoids are used for tissue repair in medical studies for animals. People want to use them for computation. Computation is extraordinarily expensive in terms of energy use, and tiny human brains get it done for less. I mean, our brains are the most complicated computer on the planet, and they use roughly 10 watts of power, not even a very particularly bright light bulb. If we could harness all of our brain's potential and use that for computation, we wouldn't have an energy crisis around data centers. Now, some people are a little bit bothered by the concept that you are using something for computation that has the capacity to have a preference, and I don't know how to feel about that one. They're not a whole human brain. There's not much going on in there, but at the rate we're going, we may get to the point where there is, and then we will have to ask ourselves some questions as society. This is one of those things for me that is both fascinating and terrifying, and I still can't look away. When the robots rebel, I will probably be the person to tell you about it. Follow for more.